and welcome everybody. This is a fireside chat with Tim Kelley of the True Purpose Institute. My name is Andy. I'm partner at encode.org. And I want to say welcome, Tim.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon.
How's that for an introduction? I'm going to spotlight both of us. Andy, if you could do that, that'd be great.
There's one. There's two. Ta-da.
Great. Cool. So, Tim, you have had a very interesting background and career. Started off at MIT, graduated in engineering.
Math, actually. I flunked out of engineering and went back and scraped it together and got a math degree.
Oh, is that right? Excellent. Good response. You were then an officer in the Navy.
Yes.
You've also worked in the corporate world for Oracle. You worked your way up. I listened to one of your podcasts, which explained that you realized at one point that you wouldn't be happier or you wouldn't have more meaningful work if you reached CEO.
Well, I didn't actually have aspirations of being CEO. I was 2 levels below the CEO, and I was really thinking more realistically about being 1 level below the CEO. I didn't think Larry was going to retire and give me the baton, but I got fairly close.
And that was 20 years ago. It was 19, 20 years ago. And since then, your path has taken quite a different trajectory, one might say. Yeah. And you've, of course, created the True Purpose Institute. You've helped thousands of individuals and quite a few organizations discover and live their purpose. And that's very much what we're going to talk about today. But I want to dive straight in. I want to ask, like, what is purpose to you? And something that we've known it for about 3 years. What does living on purpose mean? What does it look like and feel like for Tim Kelley?
Yeah. So to me, I tend to think of purpose in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those high-level self-actualization, or the layer that he added later, the self-transcendence needs, which are the needs that never stop needing. The lower level needs you can fulfill, and then they're no longer motivating. And the high level needs, that's not really the case. They just keep going. And the way I've felt that for much of my life was an acute lack of a sense of meaning, that I wasn't sure why I was doing what I was doing. And for me, that was demotivating. I don't think that's true for everybody, but I have a sort of a personality feature, which is if I don't have a clear sense of why I'm doing what I'm doing, I'm way less interested in doing it. And so that kind of took a certain amount of wind out of my sails. And even, I would say, honestly, looking back, was a mild depression for decades. And finding my purpose, really understanding why I'm here and what it is I'm meant to do, gave me the sense of meaning I'd been lacking, and gave me the sense of direction I'd been lacking. And so I always felt like I was sort of idling, like driving down the freeway in second gear or something, and not really operating at full potential. And my purpose really challenged me to operate at my full potential in a way that was uniquely suited to me. And so to me, living on purpose feels like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And oh, look, it's challenging. And I really have to be who I'm capable of being in order to pull that off. And then suddenly the life becomes this very interesting and challenging game. And the impact I'm having is much greater than I could have imagined, generally speaking. It's like, wow, I couldn't have pictured doing this, and I couldn't have pictured it going this well, and I couldn't have pictured it having this degree of impact. So to me, that's kind of what it feels like. And I've asked many audiences, what does it feel like to be on purpose? And even people who aren't 100% clear on what their purpose is, can report the experience, and they say very similar things. They say it feels like flow, it feels fulfilling, it feels easier, not always easy, but easier than being off purpose. It's motivating, it's inspiring, other people want to follow you. So it's a fairly common human experience to be able to tell whether you're on purpose or off purpose, even if you don't know what it is.
And is it realistic to expect living on purpose the whole time, or the majority of the time? Or like, can you give us a sense of flavor around that?
Yeah, so I don't think it's realistic or even healthy to be trying to do your purpose all the time. And the reason is that we need breaks. So the way I eat a meal shouldn't have to be purposeful. The way I kiss my wife shouldn't have to be purposeful. The way I play a game with my kid shouldn't have to be purposeful. The way I sleep shouldn't have to be purposeful. So I think people, in fact, some people, after finding their purpose, get very amped up about it and try to make everything purposeful, and it gets things kind of out of balance. It's sort of like if you had imagine that you had a wonderful job that you really loved so much that you tried to work 24 hours a day. It's just people just kind of intuitively or practically will look at that and say, well, that's really probably not a good idea, right? So the question becomes, how much of the time do you want to be operating on purpose for you, right? In the same way that, people want to work different amounts or play different amounts or spend different amounts of time watching TV or having sex or doing whatever. We have different appetites for these things. So I have a pretty high appetite for purpose, but for most people, if they really had the opportunity, they would sort of play around with it and find like how much purpose is the right amount for me, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. And we're actually going to go into a small breakout exploration on this very soon. So we're going to go into groups of 3. What we're going to then do afterwards in the main section of the Fireside Chat is to dive into how to actually discover and live your purpose, both at an individual and an organizational level. And we're going to dive into what is distinct about individual and what is distinct about organizational, and why is there even a difference?
Right. Yeah. And we're also going to talk about how you can get support for finding your organizational purpose, if that's something that's on the table for you. So.
That's right. Yeah. We have something cooking that we want to share in that regard. So we're going to do that after the Fireside Chat, and then we're going to go finish on the Q&As. And if we have momentum, if we have steam, we'll go beyond the hour. But if you need to leave at the hour, then by all means do leave. Great. So the questions to explore. So how the breakout rooms are going to work. We're going to give you 12 minutes. We're going to put you in a breakout room of most probably 3, or you could be in a breakout of 2. And we're going to explore in those breakouts a couple of questions. I'm going to drop those questions into the chat. But the first question is one that I asked Tim. So, what does it feel like to live on purpose for you? I'm just going to say, what is living on purpose for you? And the second question is, what do you think is stopping you from living on purpose more of the time? So the first question, what is living on purpose for you? The second is, what do you think is stopping you from living on purpose more of the time? So these breakouts are going to go really quickly. And in the interest of self-organizing efficiency, once you hit in the breakouts, you can introduce yourself by your name. And then I would suggest the person with the longest hair goes first. So.
Optional, of course, you can choose a different metric.
You can, and you could choose to go into the breakout room or not as well. That's also optional. Yeah, yeah.
What happens if there's 3 bald people?
And I guess we'll have to choose another decision-making paradigm.
All right. So are there any questions about the process? Any questions about the process? Excellent, good. Andy,
We're ready
I ask
to,
you to fire up the rooms.
yeah, we're ready to roll. It's going to be kind of groups of 3 or 4, and I'll make adjustments if people take off. By the way, I was in a thing recently and they said the person with the sexiest eyes goes first. So, you know.
Ooh, I don't know about that. That could lead to a debate. Yeah.
All right, here we go. There'll be a 12-minute timer and then we'll bring you back. Have fun.
We should have everyone back now.
Any moment.
Did we lose anyone in the wormhole?
Don't anyone caught in the interspaces.
Hope not. I think everyone's back. Well, congratulations for making it back. This is the Fireside Chat with Tim Kelley from the True Purpose Institute. And going to spend the next 25 minutes just firing some questions at you, Tim, to really dig into, like, particularly in the process that you've developed over the last 20 years, gives a real level of specificity around how to actually discover and live your purpose at an individual and organizational level. So I'd love to dive into that.
Yeah, let's.
Cool. Let's start with, like, what is individual purpose and what is organizational purpose, and why even make a distinction between the two?
Yeah. So from poking around with purposes, it seems like you can find the purpose of just about anything. Anything you could define, any individual, group, or entity, you could say, like, what's the purpose of the planet, or what's the purpose of this country, or what's the purpose of this meeting? And what you're asking in effect is, why does this thing exist? What's it for? And it's a difficult question to answer for a couple of reasons. One is that most people's minds go more quickly to what does it do, not why does it exist. They're different, and it's an important difference. So with individual purpose, we're talking about the purpose of a person. That would be the answer to the question, why am I here? And there's different ways of answering that question. The idea is to find a way of answering it that's compelling to me, if it's me we're talking about, right? Compelling to me and motivates me, gives me a reason to go do stuff, and helps me clarify which things I should do and which things I shouldn't do. And if it's a good purpose, and I would say an accurate one, which presumes the purpose is there already, which not everyone would agree with, but it's a valid frame, and many people look at it that way. If it's a good purpose and an accurate one, then it will motivate me more, give me more clarity, better direction. And the research shows that then over the course of my lifetime, I will, generally speaking, be healthier, live longer, earn more money, feel more fulfilled. There's a bunch of different, they've done a lot of research actually over the last 20 years or so. And it's like a super drug. It does all kind of cool things for the individual. Now, it's possible to live a fulfilling life and not know your purpose, right? Some people feel very fulfilled through family or work or whatever, and they're perfectly happy being who they're being and doing what they're doing, in which case I would say trying to find their purpose is irrelevant, because the need, those higher level Maslow needs, are already being met. Purpose is a strategy for creating fulfillment. So, like, the purpose of the purpose is to live a better life. And I would add to that, for probably most of the people on this call, and I actually know a lot of the people on this call, and I know it's true about them, the ones I know, are what I call change agents, meaning that we are called to create a better world. Like, there's an impulse in our personality that says we're supposed to fix society or heal the planet or, you know, upgrade consciousness or do something like that, make things better in some way. For change agents, the purpose is actually more important because there's this nagging sense of there's some change you're supposed to create. And until you find your purpose, it's not really that clear what that change is. And so for change agents, the priority of purpose goes up a lot. In fact, Tom Rausch, one of the other teachers in the True Purpose Institute, would say that it's mandatory if you're a change agent, optional if you're not. So that's the individual side of it. On the organizational side, there's actually a similar thing, which is for organizations that are change agents, and there are some organizations here I know for a fact are change agents, like Energy Circles. There are several people here from Energy Circles. There are several people here from ENCODE. There are several people here from the True Purpose Institute. Those are all change agent organizations. Those are all organizations that feel compelled to create a better world, not just generate profit for shareholders. For those organizations, same thing, like getting clear on what that change is and how to do it is super important. For organizations that are not change agents, the purpose is optional. But like with individuals, answering the question, why does this entity exist? Why are we, those who are called to work for this organization here, doing this thing? Answering those questions makes the organization healthier. Lower turnover, higher profit, greater customer satisfaction, and customer retention. There's all sorts of different measures that they've done. Higher employee engagement, like a lot higher employee engagement. And it's what's happening in society now is employees are getting frustrated working at organizations that aren't trying to help make the world a better place, and they're leaving. And it's now what was before optional is now becoming closer to mandatory. And I mean, I was just talking recently with a very large global organization, big consulting company, and with one of their HR people. And she was telling me that in some of their divisions and departments, they had turnover as high as 70%. That's incredibly costly, right? And one of the causes of that is not enough sense of purpose. The youngsters are very sensitive to that sense of purpose when they're choosing jobs.
Thank you. We'll come to the alignment between individual and organizational purpose, which is an important one, in a bit. You also talk about higher purpose. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me what you mean by that? And how is that distinct from organizational purpose, if at all?
So purpose, any answer to the question why is technically a purpose to me, to speaking from a mathematical standpoint of definition. But not all purposes are created equal. So if we say, actually we were talking about Zoom, right? When we were on the break, and Zoom, I love Zoom, and Zoom's purpose, apparently, someone looked it up on the website, it was you or Andy, said it was to make, I think it was Andy who's helping us out today who said that, that their purpose is to make virtual meetings as good or better than in-person ones. Now, that's definitely a purpose. The question of, is it a higher purpose, actually asks, well, is that actually contributing to making the world a better place in a way that you can actually detect it? Like, so it's interesting because someone once made the comment about pornography, like, I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it. A higher purpose is kind of like that. You know it when you see it. And what happens when you're in the presence of a higher purpose is you can see that that purpose is about helping someone other than the person or organization whose purpose it is, right? So when Greenpeace says we're here to save the whales, that's not for Greenpeace's benefit, that's for the whales' benefit, right? If we're going to feed the starving children or reverse climate, or like interface carpets, right? We're going to reverse climate change or something like that, right? It would be more convenient to make carpets and not worry about climate change, right? Clearly, that's trying to create a benefit for somebody else. Trying to make virtual meetings better than in-person ones, I'm not quite sure that's a higher purpose. It's kind of self-serving if you're a virtual meeting selling company. it turns out in a COVID world, that's super helpful, but it doesn't have that sort of kind of nonprofit feel to it. Like we're really going to make things better for somebody. To me, now, if to others it might, it's very subjective, right? So the higher purpose is one that has greater potential for inspiration because it's strictly about benefiting some group or entity or situation or global problem for its own sake. That's not directly chosen so that it benefits the person or organization whose purpose it is, right? And so to be really inspiring, a purpose has to have this feature of just helping. Now, will that help the organization that's doing it? Absolutely it will. Is that a problem? No, it's not. But you can't build the organization's benefit into the purpose itself and have it be inspiring. It breaks it, as Nicholas says, selfless in a nutshell. That's exactly right. Although there is benefit and should be benefit to pursuing a selfless purpose. So it's a little bit of an oxymoron lurking in there somewhere.
And that's just the byproduct of obviously serving that higher purpose. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, nice. So let's get into the how. Looking at individuals, so people on the call who may not be living on purpose as much as they'd like to be. How can they live more on purpose? Like, are there specific steps that people can take and go through?
Well, what most people do intuitively, which would also work for organizations if organizations were focused on trying to be purposeful, but most of them aren't thinking in quite this way. But what individuals do intuitively, which does actually work to a degree, is we do trial and error, right? So we get into a career or a job or a position or something like that, and we kind of notice how it feels. And is this engaging, fulfilling, inspiring? Am I getting to bring my talents to this in a meaningful way? Does it have an impact that I like? All those questions kind of rattle around in the back of people's minds, sort of semi-consciously. And if the answer to enough of those questions is no, we go looking for something else. So we keep them. My son is taking a hiatus from college and looking for his first job, and he's trying to figure out what to do. And I said to him very honestly, it really doesn't matter what you do for your first job. It's fine. Do anything. And if you don't like it, do something else. Now, that's great advice for a 19-year-old. It's not great advice for a 50-year-old, but it's great advice for a 19-year-old. So, because he has plenty of time and he needs to learn about himself, and he'll learn about himself in any job. So that trial and error method works. It actually tends to work less well as we age because we have an increased need for meaning, an increased need for purpose, and we need the purpose to be more, we need to be more precise, like being 5 degrees off starts to matter when you're 50 or 60 years old, and it doesn't when you're 19. So we really want it to be totally dialed in. And for that, you need to be plugged in some way to what that purpose is in order to be able to figure out, oh, this position or this job is marginally more purposeful than this other one. That's a level of detail and precision that requires some knowledge of the purpose. And so for that, trial and error doesn't work. So it works great at the beginning. As we age, it works less well. So then what people do after that, and this is the same for organizations, by the way, is they try to use evidence to figure out what the purpose is. And most purpose methodologies do this. They say, oh, well, when have you felt most fulfilled? And if you had a year to live, what would you do? Different questions like this that elicit kind of implicit purpose information, and then try to use that data to figure out what the purpose is. That too works great for a while. For people who really feel compelled to change the world or are serious growth and development junkies, eventually that will not be a strong enough drug either. And then we need to go for what are called the direct methods, where we're actually using meditation or dreams or written active imagination to probe the unconscious to get super precise purpose information that tells you exactly what you're supposed to be doing, with whom, how, what transformation it's supposed to create, and how that's going to change the world. right? Get like a lot of information about that. And then use that information to tune your activities, usually work activities, but it doesn't have to be, tune your activities to make them as purposeful as possible, both for your own benefit, for the fulfillment that you get and the success that you get when you're on purpose, and also for the benefit of others, for that, as Nicholas put it, selfless purpose that helps others too, right? And makes the world a better place.
So there's essentially two categories. There's the direct and the indirect.
It also happens accidentally or spontaneously, which is a third type, right? So you can like hit your head in the shower or get a cancer diagnosis and then suddenly find your purpose. I have a buddy who got in a car crash and had an out-of-body experience and was told what his purpose was. So I had it happen to me once in a dream. I was just told what my purpose was. So there's that. Then there's the indirect methods, which is the using available data to infer the purpose. And then the direct methods, which is diving into the unconscious to get the purpose information directly.
Right. And one of the things that I love what you've done and the True Purpose Institute has done is you've worked with so many people over the last 20 years that you kind of know of the proportion of those who experiment, how successful they can be with these methods, right?
Right, which methods work better for which people, and what percentage chance is if you use this method versus this method versus this method. I have to say, not very scientific, but an ongoing survey with thousands of data points.
So kind of directionally.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. In terms of, can you talk us through a little bit about the relationship between individual and organizational purpose in the discovery process and also in living it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Johan is here from Stockholm, where he and I met years ago at a Barrett Values Center conference, and I gave a whole keynote about this, which is like you're a self-organization geek, Andy, like Tom and a lot of other people on this call. Self-organization requires purpose in almost every case. Like, as far as I can tell, purpose is only optional in hierarchy. It's mandatory in all other systems. The alignment between individual and organizational purpose, to me, is like that's the engine of the future for business and organizations. Because the degree to which I feel my purpose is aligned with the organization's purpose, the more aligned they are, the more motivated I'm going to be, and the more energy I'm going to put into that organizational purpose, because it serves your purpose, the organization, and my purpose as an individual at the same time. And so that creates, we see there's a few organizations that I've worked with where they actually made the individual purpose mandatory, and then found the organizational purpose at the same time or shortly thereafter. And what frequently happens, not every time, but frequently happens, is big spikes in motivation and big spikes in performance and big financial spikes when that happens. Obviously, there's other factors at play, like pandemics and things like that. But we've seen it a couple times where the revenue just went through the roof after they did both of those things. And that, to me, to some degree, replaces what hierarchy does, which is, well, the way we'll make sure that what you're doing serves the organization is we'll tell you what to do. But in this case, if your purpose is aligned with the purpose of the organization, you don't have to be told what to do. You're going to automatically, naturally do activities that serve both purposes. And that's exactly what we would want. And so a lot of organizations are starting to look for, are people purpose-driven? Purpose-driven employees are better employees, according to a bunch of research done by Imperative. Are people purpose-driven, and how much overlap is there between the individual purpose and the organizational purpose? And obviously you have to know what the organizational purpose is and have some sense of what the individual purpose is to be able to do that. So a lot of companies are looking at finding the higher purpose of the individuals in the company as a strategy for raising employee engagement, making sure they have the right people, all sorts of different things like that. And it seems to be working great based on the early results. This is all very, very new stuff.
Yeah. How would that actually happen then in your work? Would you
Well,
do individual purpose first and then?
We tend to do individual purpose before organizational purpose, especially if we're using direct methods. And so often we'll find the higher purpose of a bunch of people in the organization and then work on the organizational purpose. After that, when they see what the individual purpose does for the employees, often they'll offer individual purpose to more employees. Like we had one company we're working on where they just hired a couple coaches to find the purpose of anyone in the organization they wanted, who wanted to, on the company's dime, because they saw how beneficial it is.
Very cool. I'm going to have a quick look at the questions that are coming in.
Yeah.
I can help point to some of those.
Yeah, we just take one or two questions. Then what we'll do is we'll dive into a little plan that we're hatching over the next few weeks.
Yeah,
we'll
so Christiana and Sam are discussing whether purpose is built in. Does it change? These are great questions. What I would say, Sam, is that people differ on whether purpose is built in or purpose is a choice. And my strategy is, because I work with a lot of people on their individual purpose, is if you think it's built in, you're right? And you're looking for the purpose that's already there. If you feel purpose is a choice, you're right. And you're looking to choose the best possible purpose. I don't think there's any benefit in trying to get the people in one camp to convince them to move over to the other camp. I don't think that's a useful use of energy to try to get those people to agree. Those are just two different beliefs about purpose. Likewise, there's the belief that purpose is constant in one's lifetime and the belief that purpose evolves in one's lifetime. In practice, it makes no difference because the purpose statements evolve. And whether that's because you're understanding the purpose better at a deeper level, but it hasn't changed, or because the purpose is evolving and you're evolving the purpose statements to keep up with the purpose, doesn't really matter. So I would say on both of those questions, you're free to choose whichever answer you like, and you'll do better if you choose the answer you like and operate in that frame than if you try to convince yourself of something else.
Great. Let's take one more.
Yeah. What else we got here? How might this work in a nonprofit organization that relies heavily on volunteers? They're actually much more dependent on purpose, Heidi, than for-profit enterprises are. Even if they're not using volunteers, often people who work in nonprofits are paid less than people who do the same work in for-profit enterprises. And so where you see purpose show up in nonprofits, is in their mission statement. The mission statement of a nonprofit organization is almost always some form of higher purpose. Because if it's not, people aren't going to be inspired to write checks, they're not going to be inspired to volunteer, and they're not going to be inspired to do the same work for less money working for the nonprofit. So the nonprofit pays people in money in some cases, but also in meaning. Like that's a currency that nonprofits use. And so they really understand the importance of this and spend a lot of time trying to get their mission statement right. For-profits, their mission statement usually isn't meant to be inspiring at all. It's meant to be focusing, right? We provide this service for these types of customers or something like that, right? Or we try to make the best whatever widgets in the market, that kind of thing. Those aren't inspiring at all. They are focusing, but they're missing a huge opportunity by not making that a real higher purpose the way nonprofits do and inspiring people to want to work there and to want to help. Good. There's a couple.
Great. Thank you, Tim. So let's talk about what we've been catching. Yeah.
So we told you at the beginning that we were going to offer you a way to work on the organizational purpose. We haven't done this before. It's really cool. This was Andrew's idea. I think this is really clever. What we're going to have is we're going to have a organizational purpose incubator. This is something I've been thinking about and designing in the back of my brain for years. Andy, can you put the link in the chat so people can see it? This would be if you either have or are part of an existing organization or you're launching something. And by the way, it doesn't have to be an organization because we're working in self-organization land. This could be a network or a movement or some other self-organized entity that's not strictly a business or other legal form, right? It could be something else. So if you click on this link, you'll see this. And what we're going to do is we're going to get people from different organizations together for 2 days over a 2-week period, 1 day in 1 week, 1 day in the next week. And we're going to do a crash course on purpose statements, how to create them, what's a good purpose statement, what's a bad purpose statement, how to test them, what are different formats you can use for purpose statements. And you can either come with a draft purpose statement for your organization that you've already created, or you can come with nothing. Either one is fine. And what we'll do is we'll teach you methods for, we're going to use indirect ones because it's a very short program. We're going to teach you methods for getting an organizational purpose in a very short period of time. And you will work with people, with the other people from the other organizations to test your organizational purpose statement to get it as good as possible. And what I like about this is a lot of the folks that I work with, and I typically charge like $25,000 to work with an organization on their higher purpose. A lot of the organizations I work with have tried this before on their own. They've tried to create their own purpose statements and usually fail miserably. And sometimes I have to tell them, and I say, you know, this purpose isn't that great. And they're like, yeah, we know. We spent 6 months on it and it's terrible. So it's surprisingly difficult to come up with a compelling, inspiring purpose statement for an organization. It's also hard to do it for a person. So we're going to walk you through that process. Now, you can do it by yourself on behalf of the organization, and hopefully you're in a role where you're allowed to do that. That would be good, right? A founder or a lead link of an anchor circle or a hierarchical leader or something like that, where you finding the purpose of the organization, other people will listen. Or you can invite other people from your organization to come to this incubator with you and work on the purpose together. And they don't have to be employees. They can just be other stakeholders in your organization. Like it could be a key customer or an investor or a donor or something like that. So we'll get all these folks together. Could you use as an independent consultant? Yes, you could. Although for an independent consultant, the difference between organizational purpose and individual purpose is so slight that it rounds to 0. But you could, right? You could show up to find the higher purpose of your consulting or therapy practice or something like that. Absolutely, that would be legit. And these methods will work in that situation. So it's 2 days. There's 1 day, we've got 2 hours and then a 2-hour break and another 2 hours. And then I think it's like 6 days later, 2 hours, another 2-hour break, and then another 2 hours. So it's an 8-hour intensive, and you'll have homework in between those 2 classes. And so in addition to getting a purpose statement out of it, you're going to learn a whole bunch about how organizational purpose statements work. So if you want to change the purpose in the future, you'll know how to do that, and you'll know how to tell whether it's a good change or a bad change, which is actually important. You need to keep updating purpose statements over time. So even if you have a purpose statement, if you've had the same purpose statement for 5 years or something, it's probably time to update it. Let me see, is there anything else that we want to say about this, Andrew? I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I think one of the things is that I've talked to a lot of people over the last few months, and this is one of the inspirations for this, who are looking to create a project or a movement or a company and to do it in a decentralized way. Yeah. But don't necessarily know how to get started, or are kind of stuck in this kind of pattern of inertia. And the way to start is really by starting with your purpose. So it's actually quite conventional in that sense. If you're looking to create a purpose-driven DAO, for example, or a for-purpose enterprise, this would actually be a really good starting point. And so the way that we've designed it is relatively short and relatively inexpensive, so that people who are coming to it from very early stages could afford it.
And Ruth, what I said was that the difference between individual and organizational purpose for an independent contractor is so small. They're not identical, but it's so small that you can basically ignore it. And you can use the same purpose statement for yourself and for your little one-person enterprise, usually. Good. So, and so we want to inspire you to make a decision quickly. We know what happens to people in their busy lives. This is starting in a few weeks, but we'd love for you to make the decision in the next few days. This is purposeful for you to work on your organization's higher purpose, or it's not. And if it is, we just want you to get on board, because if you wait several weeks, you'll forget about the whole thing. So the incentive for making the decision sooner is there's an offer code or something you need to give them. Andrew, is that right?
That's right. I'll just drop it in the chat now.
Okay, good. So if you use this offer code, it's good for, I think, like 2 days. When's the deadline on this? I don't remember. Is it Thursday?
Thursday midnight.
Thursday midnight. Which time zone? We're a very global community. Pacific time.
We debated that, didn't we?
We did.
We went for your time zone, Pacific time.
Midnight Pacific on Thursday, and until then you get $100 off, and that's either on the $497, which is for one person taking it, or the $897, which you can bring as many people as you like from your enterprise.
Well, up to 4, actually.
Up to 4. Excuse me. I was just thinking, if they brought 100, that might be disruptive. Yeah, up to 4 people from your enterprise. Good. So if you use this Feb 022 for the 2020, this Feb 2022 for the next 2 days, it'll give you $100 off.
Yeah, we got really creative on the name there, didn't we?
Yeah, I know. I was really pushing the envelope there. Good. So we only have a few minutes left. I want to leave that open for Q&A, and it could be Q&A about the program, but it can also be Q&A about anything we've covered, anything about individual or organizational purpose. And if you have to drop off, by all means, drop off. Please make sure you copy that offer code and the URL before you leave, because the chat will disappear. And we're prepared to go longer, because often there's more Q&A than fits in the amount of time. But you may or may not be able to. Do you use the direct method for organizational purpose? Yes, Ruth, we do. It's more complicated. It wouldn't fit into a 2-day incubator like this. There's organizations on this call that have used direct methods to find their organizational purpose, ENCODE being one of them. And that can take several days just for one organization to find its purpose. Usually takes like 2 days or so. And that could be like together or spread out, but that's just for one organization. We couldn't do that for many organizations at the same time. And you have to find the individual purpose of a bunch of people in the organization using direct methods first, which also takes several days. So that's a much bigger footprint operation, but absolutely we can and do use organizational higher purpose using direct methods. And some of the people on this call are trained in that. Like I noticed Susan's here, Andy, I think, has done that training. I think maybe Heidi has. There's several people on the call who are trained in finding organizational purpose using direct methods.
And Tim, could you just remind people give an example of a direct method?
Yeah, so if we were using direct method, let's say we were all part of the same company and we were using the direct methods, right? What would be happening is we would all be like meditating or something like that, and going into our unconscious, looking for purpose information about the organization, and then coming back and comparing notes to see what each of us found, which would likely all be different. And then testing the various things that we came up with to see which one is closest to the organization's purpose. And if we were finding if this were a workshop and we were finding everyone's individual higher purpose using direct methods, we'd be doing the same thing. Everyone would be journaling or meditating or asking for a dream or something like that. Some people do medicine journeys. I'm not a trained medicine journey facilitator, so I don't recommend to people which drugs to take or anything like that, but that's also a valid technique for doing it. So we're trying to get into the unconscious and game it so that what comes out is purpose information, because there's lots of stuff in the unconscious. So that's trickier to do. Works great. And at some point, we'll probably have an individual purpose workshop of some sort for folks. Right now, we're focused on the organizational one. Good. Do we all have the same purpose, and that's giving love? It's interesting, Laurent. There's various different people who have posited that we all have the same purpose, but the purpose that they posit we all have is different. So if you were to ask Rick Warren, who wrote Purpose Driven Life, everyone's purpose is to worship God. If you ask Eckhart Tolle, who wrote A New Earth or something like that, talked about purpose in that book, he says everyone's purpose is to be fully present at all moments, right? Or to bring presence into the world, right? And giving love would be another great candidate for everyone. The thing is, the fact that we all can't agree on what everyone's purpose, identical purpose is, tells me that maybe we don't all have the same purpose. And even if we do, personally, I find what's different about your purpose and my purpose more interesting than what's the same about it, right? If I do my purpose to you, something different will happen than if you do your purpose to me. And therein lies all sorts of intriguing stuff. Good. So that's my take on that, Laurent. By the way, folks, I think, can they unmute themselves? Andy, are they allowed to unmute?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so you can use your words. you can use your mouth to ask a question too. Will we send out a replay? Yes, we will, Heidi. What other questions do we have in here? Does the long-term sustainability of an organization depend on a clear sense of purpose? I would say no. And the reason I would say that, Susan, is there's lots of organizations that have survived for a very long time and been successful without having any sense of higher purpose at all. So empirically, I would say it is possible for an organization to be successful long-term without a higher purpose, right? Now, interestingly, some of the ones that have been around for a long time are very purposeful and people don't know that. And a good example of that would be Procter & Gamble. Very highly purpose-driven organization. Disney's another one, very purpose-driven organization, but you don't necessarily think of them that way because people aren't trained like classically to think of organizations in terms of higher purpose. So some of the ones that are very long-term sustainable are absolutely purpose-driven, but you wouldn't necessarily know. Some of the ones that are very long-term sustainable, not so much. I've never seen much sign of a higher purpose from IBM, but they're hanging out for a long time in a very tough space and haven't disappeared or been eaten by someone else. So good. Other questions?
I'll use my actual voice.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What do you recommend in terms of if I want to, for my individual purpose, what do you recommend for, you said you might do a workshop at some point, but in the meantime.
Yeah. So a couple things. So first of all, would you say that you're a change agent, Ruth, that you have that little voice in the back of your head telling you to change the world?
Yeah, everything you said about that like urgent need for purpose totally resonates.
Yeah, like okay.
Also the low grade depression resonates too.
So a couple different things. So one is that whether you know your purpose or not, it's easy to tell whether or not you're on purpose and to what degree. And if you are willing to like use your physical and emotional sensations and your intuition, it's also fairly easy to tell whether something you're contemplating doing is purposeful or not. So if someone says, oh, you should do this project, right? The first thing that happens for most folks is their brain tells them whether it makes logical sense or not, which is important. I don't mean to undervalue that at all. But the next step you do after that is imagine yourself doing it and notice how it feels. And you can absolutely, with fairly high accuracy, gauge how purposeful it is. If it is purposeful, it will tend to generate things like excitement and anxiety when you imagine doing it, right? Sorry about the anxiety. It's just how it is, right? It's like,
No, that resonates.
right? People get nervous about their purpose. So, so that's one thing you can do with no help at all. The other thing you can do if you're in a hurry and don't want to wait is you could put your email address in the chat, because there's at least half a dozen people on this call who are trained in finding people's higher purpose. And I'm sure they'd be happy to follow up with you and work with you one-on-one. Or you could stick around and wait until we get around to offering some kind of group purpose process for folks in the ENCODE community and the PowerShift community.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been really enlightening.
Good. Cool. Other questions?
I think that could be it.
That might be it. It looks like we've answered, but people are needing to run, and we've answered a lot of people have asked great questions. We've answered a lot of great questions. And maybe we should end it here. I somehow got off of Spotlight. Whoops. Now I took you off of Spotlight. How's this work? Add Spotlight. There we go.
I have one more question.
Yeah, please go for it.
What's, if you're willing to share, I'm curious what your individual purpose is and the purpose of your organization.
Thank you. So the True Purpose Institute, oh boy, it's been a while since I looked at it. I'm going to embarrass myself here. So if anyone remembers or has it handy, the True Purpose Institute, put it in the chat. But I remember there was something about making purpose a normal everyday thing for in human society, like that knowing your purpose, knowing your individual purpose was just something that was an expected part of everyone's life. But that's I'm wussing out here. I should be able to do better than that. For my own individual purpose, I'm going to say two of them. So when we do direct methods, we actually create 4 purpose statements, which is kind of cool. One is I guide leaders to create heaven on earth. And that's usually done in one-on-one settings with like CEOs, heads of nonprofits, politicians, to upgrade them as change agents so that they can create a better world. And then the mission is to reveal and create heaven on earth. And then I'm being told to tell you my message as well. My message is that the time to create heaven on earth is now. We have everything we need to create it. In fact, we have exactly what we need to create it, and trying to get rid of anything will make the process take longer or fail.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
If you're out there looking at something and saying, well, as soon as we get rid of that, then we can have heaven on earth, I'm telling you, you're wrong. Good. And on that cheery note, would you paste the link one more time in case people haven't copied it yet, Andrew, before they go? The
Sure.
link and that code thingy too. Oh, that was Feb 2022. It's not hard to remember. Yeah. Good. Hit that link before you go, so you got it open in a web page. And I hope to see you in a few weeks in the Purpose Incubator as we dive into organizational purpose and find a bunch of them. Good, clean fun.
Thanks for your time, Tim. Thank you for everyone for joining.
Thank you all for coming. This was awesome. I love this kind of intimate fireside chatty kind of format. This is great. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.